There was a ceasefire violation in northern Gaza, but talks continue about extending the truce between Hamas and Israel wrapped up a 15-hour operation in the West Bank. What's going on, everyone? Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. I'm recording this at 9 a.m. Central on Wednesday, November 29th, 2023. Over the past 24 hours, Israel put out the names and pictures of 3 of their soldiers that had been killed during the ongoing war with Hamas. The date of death for these soldiers was listed as October 7th. It's not clear from what I've seen if the remains were just now identified or if these soldiers were abducted by Hamas and over the past few days returned to Israeli control. The Gaza Ministry of Health put out that 15,000 Palestinians have so far been killed since October 7th. That includes 6,150 children and 36,000 wounded. The Gaza Ministry of Health information is at the very least vetted by Hamas before it's released to the public. It's not some independent third party there. Now, since the truce went into effect a couple days ago, the fighting has largely stopped in Gaza. So any increase in the casualties at this point over these last couple days is likely not due to some fighting that's not being reported, but instead casualties that are for the first time being counted or maybe uncovered from events prior to the ceasefire. Now, the 4-day truce between Hamas and Israel was extended by 48 hours, and now there's talk to extend it even further. So Hamas, up to this point, this recording of this video, have released 60 Israeli hostages in exchange for 180 Palestinians who were detained by Israel. So one challenge right now in extending this truce is that the early hostages who've been released were mostly women and children. So for Hamas to keep going and add the extra 10 hostages each day that was in the agreement, or whatever the next agreement ends up being, they're probably going to have to start releasing Israeli men and maybe even captured Israeli soldiers. Then, as of earlier today, Israel says that after these first few rounds of hostage releases, roughly 170 still remain in Hamas captivity in Gaza. And then Hamas earlier today also put out that 3 Israeli hostages were killed in Israeli airstrikes. They did not make clear if that is something that happened just before the ceasefire or immediately after October 7th or any date for that matter. It's just the information came out today. Then there was a letter circulating the internet over the past couple days, supposedly written by a hostage to their Hamas captors, thanking them for treating them so well while they were in captivity and saying, we wish you all the best. Look, it's very hard to take that with any level of confidence. And it's no different for a Hamas fighter that is being questioned in Israeli captivity. Anytime somebody is in captivity, they're in a compromised state. They don't know what their future holds. You don't know their mental or emotional state, or if there's any level of direct or even kind of suggested coercion. I mean, we ran into this a lot in the early days of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. There were a handful, quite a few actually, Russian soldiers that ran away and surrendered to Ukrainian forces, and they would immediately go on camera and say, I don't want to be here. I don't want to fight. I'm peaceful. I don't want war with Ukraine. I just want to go home. And people took a lot of that footage to say, hey, this is indicative of the Russian military. This speaks for the Russian military. We're getting this insight into what life is like there. They're on the verge of going home. They're on the verge of collapse. And here we are 2 years later. I think it's safe to say that those individual accounts from random Russian soldiers in Ukrainian captivity probably did not speak perfectly to the mood in the overall Russian forces. Now, there was a noted ceasefire violation yesterday, but it's not exactly clear quite yet what happened. Israel said that 3 explosives were detonated near their troops in northern Gaza, and at one of the locations, IDF forces came under direct fire, adding that at least some of their soldiers were wounded in that engagement. Hamas said that a violation occurred, calling it a friction, and that their mujahideen dealt with it, adding that they are committed to the truce so long as Israel is. Now, there have been other accusations of violations from both sides since this truce went into effect, but this is the first time from what I've seen that both parties have acknowledged the same event. Now, fortunately, that event did not lead to a breakdown of the ceasefire and a continuation of hostilities, and I think part of the reason for that is that both sides, to a degree, want this ceasefire to continue. So for Israel, they're getting their people home, which is huge. I mean, they still have a goal of dismantling and destroying Hamas, which is far from complete, but you can't underestimate just how powerful it is for some of these hostages to actually be getting back into Israeli territory. And for the Palestinian people caught in the middle of this war, of course, the truce has meant access to humanitarian aid, medical supplies, and a reprieve from just the constant bombardment and fighting going on all around them. And then, finally, it's probably been pretty good for Hamas. This is the first time in 2 months that their leaders aren't being targeted 24/7, that their fighters aren't being killed on a daily basis. And look, if we're being honest, you got to think that at least a little bit of that humanitarian aid has made it into the hands of some of the Hamas militants. And there's also the possibility, this is going to be hard to prove right now or even in the future, but there's the possibility that Hamas is using the ceasefire to relocate, reposition forces, resupply certain areas, and make preparations for the next phase of this war. So, so long as there are hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza, there is the possibility that this truce continues to be extended. Then shifting over to the West Bank, the IDF wrapped up a 15-hour operation in Jenin earlier today. The IDF said that Mohammed Zabadi and Husma Hanan were killed in a firefight after their position was surrounded. Israel says that these two were responsible for shooting attacks and coordinating terrorist activity in the area. Additionally, Israel says that during other raids throughout the West Bank, they arrested 22 people, found weapons, explosives, and other military equipment scattered throughout those various locations. The Mujahideen Brigades, which is an armed group affiliated with Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad that operates both out of Gaza and the West Bank, put out a statement saying, quote, "Our Mujahideen confront the occupation forces and vehicles storming Jenin camp and target them with a number of explosive devices and live bullets. It is a jihad of victory or martyrdom." Then the Al-Quds Brigade, which is a wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, said, quote, "Our Mujahideen and the Jenin Battalion fought with all strength and ability in a confrontation that lasted for hours, inflicting great losses on the occupation forces. Our heroic Mujahideen carried out several ambushes and caused confirmed casualties among the enemy's ranks. They were subjected to a torrent of fire and ambushes of explosive and explosive devices. Our Mujahideen, with the power of God, also carried out operations to detonate a number of bombs on enemy infantry, on vehicles and infantry forces in the Al-Damj neighborhood, which led to certain casualties." End quote. So a quick note here, Israel views the security situation in Gaza and the West Bank differently, similar but different security threats. So the ceasefire that was negotiated with Hamas was over hostilities in Gaza, made no mention of the West Bank. So there are some Hamas backers that view the two together, the West Bank and Gaza, more of like one overall cause. But I really haven't seen anyone over the past few days suggest that these West Bank operations are in any way a violation from either side of the agreed upon truce. Then Iran released this drone footage a couple days ago of them watching the USS Eisenhower carrier strike group as it transited the Strait of Hormuz. So the Navy put out that this strike group entered the Persian Gulf on Sunday amid heightened tensions in the region, namely between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. The USS Mason is actually part of this carrier strike group. It was the Mason who a couple days ago responded to a distress signal from a commercial vessel that was under attack from pirates. When I initially reported that, it sounded like those were Houthi pirates coming from Yemen. But after those 5 men were chased off, captured, and then questioned, it now looks like they were Somali instead. Then after those 5 were arrested, the Mason and the commercial vessel came under ballistic missile attack. 2 missiles were fired from Yemen territory that fell about 10 miles short of the 2 vessels. That was the Houthis. That came from Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. And that's kind of what the Eisenhower Strike Group is stepping right in the middle of, right? This is what they're there for, is that the goal of de-escalating tensions in the region. And it's not just Iran at this point, threatening U.S. forces or commercial shipping in the region, but now the Houthis have stepped into that as well, right? Just over the last few weeks, the Houthis have launched multiple drones and missiles at Israel, some at U.S. shipping, and continue to make threats about attacking and taking over any commercial vessels, even remotely linked to Israel. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if interested in national security subjects, be sure to check out the sit reps I put out on Substack. Link is in the description below. Substack now also has ad-free, sponsor-free videos published about 1 hour before they go live on YouTube. But thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.